Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for joining us, Willow and Howard Lyman. Would you please tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you two met?
Well, let's see. We're both from Great Falls, Montana. I was a year ahead of Howard in school, and I can remember him running around the hall being obnoxious, and I thought, I never want anything to do with that guy. Right. And anyway, I was married and living in Arizona with 3 children, and my husband died of leukemia. So I moved back to Great Falls, and then I met Howard again. He was friends with my brother, and we were married. And now we have 2 children. I have 3 children from my first marriage, and Howard and I have 2. And 3 of those daughters are on the East Coast, so that's where we're moving back to be closer to them.
I'm going with her.
Good idea.
Good idea. I suppose you both know that you are a bit of a celebrity. And if you're comfortable, we would love to just touch on your experience with the Oprah interview and how that has impacted your lives.
Okay.
Well, I went to Washington, D.C. to work for a small farm organization called Montana, our National Farmers Union. And when I was there, I heard about what was happening in England on mad cow disease. I looked into it, and it looked like a disaster coming for American agriculture. And so I started talking about how we were dealing with the problem. And anyway, Oprah decided she was going to do a show on the issue. I was the only person publicly speaking about the issue in the nation. And so she invited me to appear on her show. Was on the show, and a few million people saw it. Cattlemen got excited about it, encouraged the Texas Department of Agriculture to file suit against us, and they decided not to. And so a group of Texas cattlemen sued Oprah and myself for a few $100 million. We were on a trial in Amarillo, Texas for 6 weeks. The jury found Oprah and myself not liable. They sued again. We again were found not liable. They sued again, and we won again. And finally, they gave up on it. And so what should have been about a 24-hour program, due to the fact that they made such an issue out of it, everybody in the nation knew about it. And so I got somewhat of infamous over that.
But you didn't start out where you started from. Howard started on a farm and ranch in Montana from when he was a little kid, and we were there until, what year did we leave? 1987, when we went to Washington, D.C.
Willow, were you and Howard married at the time of the Oprah interview?
Yes. We were both working out of Washington, D.C. I was working for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, and he was in Amarillo, and he couldn't. Oh, I'm sorry. He couldn't talk. He couldn't talk to me over the phone about anything. What a restraining order? Is that what they had?
Well,
Yeah, they had a restraining order, so we couldn't talk about what was going on. So I learned about everything that was going on through television and radio. It was an interesting time.
How has that experience impacted your other interests or activism? And has there been any other far-reaching impacts like that?
Yeah.
well, when you look at it, American agriculture today is not sustainable. Most people don't realize it, but the fact of it is that what we're eating and much of what we're growing is destroying the planet. So I became a spokesman about, organic agriculture and vegan diets. And so I've spent a lot of time talking to people about making changes. And I'll tell you, if we don't make more of them before 2045, the Homo sapiens species will cease to exist on planet Earth.
What would you like us to be doing every day to help work towards a more sustainable future?
Well, the first thing to do is ask yourself, who's producing your food and how they're producing it, and what you can do to make the planet much more sustainable. It's not going out on the streets and starting a big public demonstration. It's about individually what we do. And that will make the entire difference on whether we become sustainable on the planet as Homo sapiens or not. And so it's everything you do, where your transportation, what you're eating, what you're wearing, the insulation, the house you live in, all of those things are going to make a big, big difference. And if you pay no attention, before we know it, it's going to be too late.
If you feel comfortable sharing any personal experiences or global, like the pandemic, how have they, what are some other significant events in your lifetime that have really impacted you, and how do you remember them?
Well, our experience working in Washington, D.C. was memorable. You have to realize we left the farm and the ranch in Montana and went to work in Washington, D.C. So it was a culture shock. And we were pretty greenhorns, but we learned fast. And I was fortunate to work with one of the oldest and most influential female lobbyists in Washington, D.C. And so I was able to meet presidents and foreign ministers and do all kinds of interesting things that I never dreamt I would. So that made a big impact on my life. And it was very exciting for a couple of years. But after about 5 years, it was just, oh no, another reception, another this and that. But it was quite an experience. And I'm a real political junkie now because I lived it for quite a while, and Howard even more so. So that was a big impact on our life to go from Montana to Washington, D.C.
How long was your time in DC?
Were there 18 years, I think, 18 or 19 years. And we looked all over the country after I retired for a place to retire to. And Howard was still working. And we looked all over the country. And we met Cynthia Murray when they lived in Virginia. And Howard spoke at one of her gatherings. And so she asked us to come out to Ellensburg and speak. So we did. And Howard said, we need to look at this place. So of course, Cynthia and Jim invited us out and threw a party, about 50 people at the party at Hell Homes. And they invited us to move to Ellensburg. And they were building straw bale houses. And that was real interest to Howard. And so he wanted to build a straw bale house. So we decided in a short period of time, let's move to Ellensburg. So that's what we did. And it's been wonderful. We are really going to miss Ellensburg and the people here. But it's time for us to go be closer to our kids.
Did you build the straw bale house?
No, we didn't. The situation was so that we were on a book tour, right? We were on a book tour and we'd rented a house, and the guy was going to sell the house. So we had to get out and we had to leave on a book tour. So we thought we got to do something. So we looked around for a house to buy, and we found this one, and we didn't have time to build a straw bale house. And of course, there weren't any for sale. So luckily, we ended up with this house and turned out okay. But one of these days, Howard's going to want to be involved with the straw bale house. I'm sure of that.
We're gonna build all kinds of straw bale houses up at the low income housing at the cemetery. So there will be more of them in Ellensburg before long.
Yeah, but you'll be gone, so you'll miss building them.
I'll give them all the instructions they can stand over the phone.
For our listeners or viewers, could you please give us a brief rundown of what a straw bale house is?
Well, a straw bale house is you take and put on a foundation, a slab, and then the walls are built out of straw bales. You end up with the same window openings and doors and that, but the walls, instead of being, a 4-inch or a 6-inch wall, they end up to be a 14-inch wall. The insulation factor is by far greater. The cost of heating your house is significantly less. And the nice thing about it is all you have to do is invite your friends. And so you can build your house with your friends. And there's a group of people in town here that have done it. And I just talked to a good friend of mine that tells me he's lived in his straw bale house here in Ellensburg now for 19 years. So it's a great way of building, but it's one that's not known by a lot of people, but it's a phenomenal savings in the heating and cooling of it by using the straw bales.
And the outside is usually stuccoed, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Stuccoed with clay. And, unless you know that the building is a straw bale, if you take right now D&M Coffee down on Water Street, that's a straw bale building, and I'll bet you most people don't even know it.
Wow, that's interesting. Thank you. We are 1 year into the coronavirus pandemic. How have you, Willow and Howard, spent the last year?
Pretty much at home. At least I'm at home all the time. Howard has to go up to the cemetery all the time, but we've been very careful. I order my groceries online and drive up and pick them up. I haven't been inside a grocery store since last March. We both had our shots, both shots, and so we're getting ready to travel. And we're a little concerned about that, but it's been an easy transition for me, being quarantined here in the house in the pandemic and being away from my friends and everything. So it's kind of easy to transition, going to a new place and meeting new people. And it hasn't been as hard for me as it has for some people. I've kept plenty busy quilting and cooking and doing those kind of things. And we Zoom with our kids twice a week, at least. So that's been nice.
Since you've been in Ellensburg, you've been very involved in the community, not just here at KVUC. Tell us about some project events or groups that are particularly meaningful to you.
You get to go first.
Well, we came in 2005. Shortly after that, I joined the Odd Fellows, which has been around since the 1800s here in Ellensburg and around the world since the 1300s. So that was interesting. It was a dying chapter, and now we've been able to resuscitate it, and we have about 75 members, and we're putting in an elevator, and we have one of the finest old buildings here in Ellensburg. Also got involved in the cemetery, and the cemetery has been interring people here since about late 1870s. So we have 11,500 people interned in the cemetery. Most of them like it. Nobody's kicked their dirt off, and so we're doing rather well. We started out, we're about $40,000 in the hole, and today we've turned it around where we actually have a cash balance. So that's been satisfying. I was also involved in starting an environmental group here, Our Environment. And one of the things we got the city to do before the pandemic was to limit the use of plastic bags at grocery stores. Needless to say, that has gone by the wayside during the pandemic, but at least we make the city think about the environmental things to do. I would say that it's probably one of the hardest working groups in Ellensburg, and I think we will see great benefit out of that in the future as far as how the city deals with cleaning up their environmental act. So those are the things I've been involved with, and we've had a good time at it. My wife will tell you all about the Ellensburg Vegetarian Society.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. Well, with Jim and Cynthia, Howard and I started the Ellensburg Vegetarian Society. And that was probably in what year? 2006 or 7. And we started out with a lot of college kids at first, especially if we had it at the college, we'd have 70 people. And then we got so that we were having about 30 or 35 people. But of course, the pandemic stopped that. And so that was, we felt rather successful. People were calling it the best meal in town, and I agree. I'm very involved in the quilters. We in about 3 different quilting groups. Ellensburg has really become a center for quilting. And Friday Club, I was active in that. And of course, the church. And there's no end to things that you can do in Ellensburg, which is really amazing for a small town. And it's the best town I've ever been in that has volunteer spirit. I mean, everybody volunteers for something just about. It really is impressive. We'll miss it.
Thank you. What is something that you think would surprise listeners to know about you?
Well, let's see. Probably recently, with our moving, we've heard a lot from a lot of people around the country. And we not only have 5 children between the 2 of us, we also have a foster Vietnamese son who's a champion poker player. And he's won millions of dollars, and he spent millions of dollars. We have 2 or 3 young men that came to us working for us on the ranch that practically adopted us. So we figure that we have 3 more boys. And so we've really got a big family and lots of friends all across the country, especially with Howard's travels. There isn't hardly a city in the state that he doesn't know people. And so we've had to send out a lot of postcards to tell people we've got a change of address. I suppose that's not so surprising though.
What is something that you would want us to remember?
I think that the other thing to remember is that Ellensburg is a city where anything is possible. The talent is here to do almost anything. When you take a look at the university status at Central, there's a lot of brain power, there's a lot of energy. Nothing you can imagine, in my opinion, cannot be achieved in Ellensburg. And so I have to say the only thing that will not happen in Ellensburg is that somebody doesn't care enough to start doing it. And if they do, I feel sure it can be achieved.
It's an amazing community. It really is.